Okay, now we're going to be talking about social cognitive perspectives on personality. And see, pictured here is Albert Bandura. He is one of the most well-known proponents of this perspective. Basically, with social cognitive theories, the emphasis is on your conscious awareness, your beliefs, your expectations, your goals. And this is, again, this is all conscious. In other words, you are aware of what your goals are. You're aware about your beliefs about yourself, your expectations about what your behaviors will accomplish. So these kind of beliefs that you have about yourself are important in terms of defining our personality and directing our behavior. Some of the learning principles that we learned about from basically operant conditioning, classical conditioning are relevant here. You know, we are engaging in behavior to seek reward and to avoid punishment, and we are, and when we do this, you know, we're thinking about what our expectations about what behaviors will be rewarding and what won't be. So it's these expectations that essentially allow us to make good decisions. We use reasoning, and we are relying on our beliefs about the world around us. We reflect on our own behavior, our own history of what we've done. So doing all this is all cognitive. It's all coming in from inside your brain, but nevertheless they are based on the basic principles of learning. So it's often called social learning theory as well. How we interpret the situation determines how we behave in the situation. So all of that is important. And again, it's the relationship between how we think about the environment as well as our interaction with the environment. So Albert Bandura's theory of personality has been called reciprocal determinism. And essentially what that means is that you have three determinants of our behavior. You have the behavior itself, you have the environment that the person is in, and the thought processes that the person is having. All three of these components work together with each other. They interact with each other. They affect each other. So you can't just simply separate one out. They're all involved in determining our behavior. So our personality essentially is the way we behave, the way we interact with the environment, the way we think about the environment. All of that coming together essentially can describe our personality. Some of the other things that Bandura has contributed is he's done very famous research on observational learning. You might have remembered about the Bobo doll study that we talked about when we talked about learning. That was Albert Bandura. Another variable that's important from Bandura's point of view is a sense of personal control. This is the belief that you have control over the outcomes that you get. So in other words, you believe if you work hard, you will succeed. If you don't work hard, you will fail. You believe that you have the ability to do things. So you have a sense of personal control over your life. You have some belief, at least, that your life is under your control. But again, this is really a belief. I mean, we do have some control, but really we are all victims of environmental circumstances. But it's this sense that you have this personal control that is important. It's also important for good health. Finally, self-efficacy, which is very much related to personal control. Your sense of self-efficacy is your belief that your behaviors will lead to desired outcomes. So in other words, you believe that by studying for an exam, you will do well on an exam. That means you have a high sense of self-efficacy. If you believe that no matter how hard you study, you're still going to fail, that means you have a low self-efficacy, that you believe that your behaviors will not have a large impact on the results you're looking for. So self-efficacy is very important. If you can imagine this, you know that studying that people, the more you study, the better your chances of doing well on an exam. But if you have a belief about you and your studying ability, then you're going to basically say, no matter how much I study, it's not going to help me. So you end up not studying, and then you're definitely going to fail. So self-efficacy is a very important aspect of your personality when it comes to guiding your behavior. If you have high self-efficacy, you're going to be much more likely to engage in a particular behavior than if you have low self-efficacy. So here's an illustration of reciprocal determinism. Your behavior impacts your your personality, your cognitive factors, how you think about the behavior. Your behavior influences the environment, kind of leads you to go to the environment that you want to go to. Your environment guides your behavior, and so on. So this is all interacting with each other. Walter Mischel was another social cognitive theorist, and basically he came up with the concept of situationalism, which is very controversial, because basically he was saying that your personality doesn't really matter much at all. It doesn't really predict what behaviors you're going to do. Rather, you have to look at the situation. The situation is what predicts your behavior. So situationalism in its pure form is basically saying that your personality doesn't really matter. It's the situation that guides your behavior, and your behavior will change from situation to situation. Clearly, this point of view has some disagreement. But Mischel has also changed his views on this, modified it. It's not really just the situation. It's kind of an interaction between the personality and the situation that's key. So while situationalism is essentially saying your behavior, your personality is going to change from context to context, the CAPS model kind of is more specific and does show how behavior can be predicted from personality. But you have to be more specific. First of all, you have to consider that if you want to predict someone's behavior as a result of their personality, the behavior and personality should match in context. So if you feel that you are very sociable in parties, and that is an aspect of your personality, then if you go to a party, we would expect to see that you are sociable. If, however, you are sociable in a classroom environment but unsociable in a party, then I would expect that in a classroom environment you'd be sociable, in a party environment you would be unsociable. So it's that match between your personality and the context in which your personality can be expressed that's important. So the CAPS model CAPS stands for Cognitive Affective Processing System. What that means is individuals encounter different situations all the time, and when they encounter a situation, they have thoughts about the situation, what they're thinking about, how they're interpreting the situation. They have an affective component in terms of how they are feeling about the situation, and this cognitive, what they think about it, what they feel about the situation, essentially guides and predicts how the person will behave in that situation. So it's a little bit more complicated than just say extroverted people are sociable. You're really saying that extroverted people, when they encounter a lot of people, they think about the people as in a way that this is an opportunity for me to talk to people. I can learn from them and they can learn from me. You might also have feelings about it. I like being with people in this circumstance, so having your thoughts and your feelings about it will predict how sociable you'd be in that. And the CAPS model is good at predicting stability over time, meaning if you consider yourself an extroverted person, kind of following you over time, you'd be able to see that pattern develop, the behaviors of being sociable. However, sociability will vary a lot from situation to situation. You can have a very extroverted person who will be shy and quiet in a classroom. So you have to kind of pay attention to, over time, how sociable this person behaves, and that wouldn't be follow the CAPS model. So again, to sum up, the CAPS model shows the interconnections between our thoughts, our cognitions, and our emotions when it comes to our behavior, when it comes to how we interpret our situations that we're in, and that is key. So what do we think about social cognitive theory? It's actually a very, useful, good theory, and there's been a lot of research on variables like self-efficacy and whatnot. So it's generated a lot of research. It makes a lot of good predictions. And a good contribution is that it focuses on interactions of individuals with their environment. If you're thinking about Freud again, for example, everything is going on in the unconscious mind, your thoughts about it coming from the id. But really, we are social beings and we're interacting with others. And the environment has an enormous impact on our behavior. And we also are actors on our environment as well. We can change the environment too. Which again, the idea is that people can control their environment. They can choose places to go. We're not just simply victims of the environment. The strict behavioral point of view, behaviorism, is again, we are completely, just responding to the environment. But over with the cognitive theory, the social cognitive theory, we're making decisions about the environments we choose to enter into. So that involves personality, that involves personal choice, that involves your thought processes, your feelings, much more so than the strict behaviorism of stimulus response. Some criticisms of social cognitive theory is it may be too concerned with change and how personality changes. Maybe you're kind of forgetting that there is some stability in personality, and they may de-emphasize stability in the personality and more emphasize how personality changes with the situation. Another criticism, it really doesn't talk about the role of biology and that there are biological differences in terms of how people react to situations and the emotional response in terms of blood pressure and whatnot. So there are biological differences that can have an enormous impact on our personality too. Finally, particularly when we're talking about the CAPS model, you're making very specific predictions about behavior in a very specific context. So in that respect, it makes it hard to generalize to other situations. So in this case, it's something to think about.